Maldives cave horror. Haunting mystery inside Maldives shark cave. Five Italian divers dead as chilling new theories surface. A horrifying diving tragedy in the Maldives has shocked the world after five experienced Italian divers were found dead deep inside the infamous Thinwana Kandu cave, a dark underwater labyrinth chilling known as Shark Cave. Now let's dig deeper into the story and uncover what really happened on our AI podcast.
Imagine floating in just, postcard perfect blue water. The sun is warm, the waves are gentle.
Don't feel ideal, right?
Exactly. But then, 160 feet directly beneath you, hidden in the pitch black, is a labyrinth where physics itself essentially becomes a weapon.
Oh, absolutely. It's a completely hostile environment.
Right. And today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. We have this stack of government reports, deep-sea technical analyses, and some really heartbreaking statements from grieving families.
Yeah, the human element here is just devastating.
It really is. All of this material details how five elite divers bypassed their own survival instincts, swam into the Thinwana Kandu cave system, and basically triggered one of the deadliest diving disasters in the history of the Maldives.
It is a profoundly unsettling case, mostly because, because of the extreme environment involved. We are looking at a location that's ominously nicknamed Shark Cave.
Which is an intimidating name right off the bat.
Oh, for sure. It's a place that demands absolute technical perfection from anyone who, dares to enter it.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to unravel that mystery for you. We are parsing through official Maldivian government statements. We're analyzing dive logs with insights from technical experts and reading those raw accounts from the families left behind.
Because we really want to figure out how a seemingly routine expedition just turned into an absolute nightmare.
Right.
What's fascinating here is the sheer dissonance at the center of this tragedy. I mean, we aren't talking about a group of amateurs who just wandered into a dangerous environment on a whim, completely blind to the risks.
Yeah, these weren't tourists on their first dive.
Exactly. The victims here were highly experienced Italian divers. These are people who theoretically knew exactly what they were doing, people who had logged countless hours underwater,
Right.
And yet they ended up dead deep inside a claustrophobic cave system. It triggered this mystery that has completely baffled authorities and the global diving community alike.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we need to start with the grim reality of the crime scene itself. Because if you want to understand the decisions that were made, you have to deeply understand the physical environment they were trapped in.
Let's look at the geography first. The site is located near Vavu Atoll, which is roughly 60 miles from Male, the capital of the Maldives.
Okay.
And the cave system itself, Thinwana Kandu, stretches about 60 meters long into the reef. But it isn't just one open cavern where you can just, easily see the exit.
It's more complex than that.
Very much so. It actually consists of three separate, distinct underwater chambers. So to progress deeper into the system, you have to navigate from one chamber to the next through incredibly narrow, winding, claustrophobic rock passages.
And the footage described in the recovery reports paints this incredibly isolating picture. I mean, when you hear the word Maldives, your brain immediately goes to vibrant coral reefs teeming with colorful marine life.
Yeah, that classic tropical image.
Right. But the reality inside Shark Cave is the exact opposite. Divers are captured on film moving through this thick, murky darkness. It is eerily lifeless.
Yeah, the contrast is stark.
It's just silent, dark water with only a lone stingray seen drifting through the maze of rock.
It's an environment completely devoid of visual comfort. There is no ambient light piercing through from the surface at all.
Wow. Total darkness.
Total darkness. And navigating those tight switchbacks means losing your physical bearings almost immediately.
And into that hostile environment went five people. I just want to ground this in the human element for a second, because at the core of all this data and physics are real lives lost.
Absolutely.
The victims were identified as Monica Montefalcone, Georgia Somacol, Federico Gualtieri, Muriel Odanino, and Gianluca Benedetti.
5 lives extinguished in the dark. The sheer scale of the disaster really comes into focus when we look at the recovery data. Ahmed Sham, the spokesperson of the Maldivian government, released a pretty detailed report on the grim discovery made by rescue teams days after the group vanished.
Right. And according to Sham's report, one diver was found near the entrance of the cave, but the other 4 were located all the way in the third and largest segment of the cave system, clustered pretty much together.
Yeah.
And they were found at nearly 160 feet underwater.
That depth is critical to everything that follows. I mean, 160 feet is unimaginably deep for standard recreational diving, especially inside an overhead environment where you cannot simply swim up if something goes wrong.
Just to help you visualize how terrifying this scenario is, think about navigating a haunted house. You're in a pitch black, winding maze, and you're already disoriented.
Right, that's scary enough on dry land.
Exactly. Now imagine that haunted house is completely submerged in freezing, murky water. You are relying on a finite tank of air strapped to your back to survive every single second.
And the clock is constantly ticking.
Yes. And the most horrifying part, if you get lost or if you panic, you can't just stand up. You can't just walk out a fire exit. You are trapped under a physical ceiling of solid rock, 160 feet below the surface of the ocean.
Every foot you travel horizontally into that cave is a foot you must perfectly retrace just to survive. The psychological weight of that containment, coupled with the absolute darkness, it induces a level of stress that most human beings simply cannot process.
Which means we have to stop and reflect on those final moments. To be trapped down there, realizing your air is depleting, knowing the surface is blocked by hundreds of feet of jagged rock, it is a terrifying reality to confront.
It is a sobering thought, which forces us to evaluate the catalyst for this descent. Why were they there?
Right, because if we accept that these were elite divers who knew the cave was a death trap without the right gear, we have to look for an external trigger. Did the weather force them into that specific chamber, or maybe push them deeper than they intended to go?
The environmental factors certainly form one of the major theories surrounding the incident. Just one day before this fatal expedition, Maldivian authorities had actually issued a yellow weather warning for the region due to strong winds.
The report specified 30-mile-per-hour winds. And surface weather drastically affects water conditions below. It creates intense surface chop, alters underwater currents, and destroys visibility.
Yeah, the ocean completely churns up.
Right. It causes massive turbulence at the mouth of cave systems. It makes standard diving dangerous and cave diving exponentially more lethal.
We do have a very passionate defense, though, pushing back against the idea that the divers simply ignored this warning out of recklessness. Carlos Sumical, the husband of victim Monica Montefalcone, provided a statement painting a picture of a really exceptionally disciplined diver.
You can really feel the grief in his words, but also his absolute certainty in her skills. He stated that his wife was recognized as one of the world's best divers.
Yeah, he was very adamant about that.
His exact quote was, "She would never have put her daughter's life or the lives of the other children at risk out of recklessness." Something happened down there. He completely rejects the idea of a careless amateur mistake.
He even addresses the weather warning directly. He argues that if there really was a yellow alert actively impacting the waters, they must have executed their dive earlier, before the worst of the weather hit. He said, "I'm ready to swear anything about Monica's behavior."
But I have to push back on this timeline and the decision-making logic here. If she really was one of the best divers in the world, wouldn't an elite diver be the first person to respect a weather warning?
You would think so, yes.
Amateurs might ignore a yellow alert because they don't know better, but an expert knows exactly what 30-mile-per-hour winds can do to a dive site. Could the weather have suddenly shifted while they were down there, pushing a massive current into the cave and trapping them inside?
It's a possibility.
Or is the weather actually a red herring for a completely different kind of failure?
Well, investigators and technical diving experts gravitated toward that exact question. Because if we assume they didn't just recklessly ignore a storm, we are forced to look at the mechanical, technical reality of the dive itself to find the fatal error.
The margin for error is just so small.
Exactly. The margins at that depth are so razor thin that weather might have just been a background detail to a much more catastrophic systemic failure.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because when you start digging into the expedition's paperwork and their permits, a massive, glaring discrepancy emerges.
The group was operating off a yacht called the Duke of York. According to the official reports, the Duke of York allegedly lacked the authorization to conduct dives deeper than 100 feet.
100 feet was their absolute legal permitted limit for this expedition. And yet, the bodies of the 4 divers were found clustered together at approximately 160 feet.
Yeah.
They were 60 feet beyond their permitted depth.
In the ocean, 60 feet isn't just a mild overstep. It represents crossing a fundamental biological and physical threshold.
So at 160 feet, we aren't just talking about running out of air faster. We're talking about the physics of the breathing gas fundamentally changing under extreme pressure, right?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to examine the unforgiving physics of deep-sea diving. We have a blunt, almost chilling assessment from American deep-sea diver Mark Randazza, who reviewed the details of this tragedy.
And what did he say?
His conclusion was absolute. He stated, at 150 feet, with recreational gear and without a special gas mix, you're already dead.
You're already dead. That implies your fate is sealed before your brain even registers that you are in an emergency. The pressure is literally altering the chemistry of what's keeping you alive. Explain the mechanics of that. Why does standard air become a death sentence?
It comes down to how gases behave under the immense physical pressure of the ocean. Standard compressed air, which is what recreational divers breathe, is mostly nitrogen and oxygen.
Right.
At 160 feet, the ambient pressure is so intense that the nitrogen dissolves rapidly into your bloodstream, and under that pressure, it acts as a powerful narcotic anesthetic.
This is what divers call the martini effect, or nitrogen narcosis.
Yes, exactly.
The rule of thumb in the diving community is that for every 50 feet of depth, the narcotic effect on your brain is equivalent to drinking 1 martini on an empty stomach.
Precisely. So by the time these divers reached 160 feet, their brains were heavily intoxicated by the nitrogen. Their cognitive function would be drastically impaired.
We wouldn't even be able to think straight.
No, not at all. They might experience false euphoria, extreme anxiety, or utter confusion, completely stripping them of the ability to navigate a complex, winding cave system.
And it isn't just the nitrogen that turns on you, is it? The oxygen in standard air becomes physically toxic at those extreme partial pressures.
Yes, oxygen toxicity is incredibly dangerous.
It can trigger sudden, violent seizures. And having a seizure underwater, especially 160 feet deep inside a cave, is an immediate, unrecoverable death sentence.
This physiological reality is exactly why former Maldives National Defense Force diver Shafraz Naeem was so alarmed when reviewing this case.
He knows this specific cave well, right?
He knows Thinwana Kandu intimately, having explored the system dozens of times. He outlined the non-negotiable safety nets required to survive that depth.
According to Naeem's technical analysis, you cannot just swim down there with standard tanks. You need a highly specific, customized gas mixture.
Yeah, often replacing nitrogen with helium to completely eliminate that narcotic effect.
Right. And you need advanced decompression planning so your tissues don't tear apart on the way up. You need completely redundant backup air systems in case a valve fails. And above all, you need specialized, technical cave diving training.
Naeem's warning really crystallizes the absolute danger of the site. He stated, "Expertise and precaution are necessary. I always had the right gas mix, the right equipment, and a backup system."
So he was fully prepared.
Always. He questioned why this expedition proceeded at all under those conditions, noting that at those extreme depths, even a tiny mistake becomes fatal within seconds, not minutes, seconds.
So what does this all mean? When we synthesize all these pieces, the 100-foot permit limit on the yacht, the discovery at 160 feet, the reliance on inadequate recreational gear, the narcotic intoxication, and the claustrophobic cave environment, it means this wasn't just a simple case of losing their way in the dark.
No, it was a cascading technical failure.
One broken rule compounded another, creating an inescapable trap.
They crossed a physical threshold where their equipment simply lacked the mechanical capability to keep them alive. They pushed standard recreational gear into an extreme technical environment, and the physics of the ocean took over.
The sheer tragedy of that extreme depth is that it didn't just seal the fate of the original 5 divers. It weaponized the environment against anyone attempting to bring them back. It set the stage for a devastating secondary tragedy.
Because recovering bodies from a pitch-black labyrinth 160 feet underwater is just a monumentally complex operation.
Especially in a labyrinth that has already proven it can kill highly experienced divers in seconds.
Exactly. It was far beyond the capabilities of standard local authorities. The Maldivian government recognized the extreme lethality of the cave and had to reach out internationally for specialized help.
Who'd they call?
They called in an elite Finnish cave diving unit assembled by Dan Europe, the Divers Alert Network.
We are talking about absolute legends in the global technical diving community here. The team included Sami Pakarinen, Jenny Westerland, and Patrick Gernfist.
These divers are incredible.
Just to give you a sense of their caliber, these are the exact same divers who pulled off the famous, harrowing Plura Cave rescue in Norway back in 2014.
They operate on a completely different level of human endurance and technical mastery. The sources detail that these divers are capable of descending to nearly 500 feet underwater.
500 feet, that's insane.
Right. And to do that, they don't use standard compressed air. They use specialized trimix gases, closed-circuit rebreathers, and carry multiple bailout tanks. It really represents the absolute pinnacle of technical dive gear.
The contrast is stark. You have the Finnish rescue team entering the cave, armed with cutting-edge, redundant technical systems specifically designed to cheat the physics of the deep ocean. And you have the victims, who entered that same hostile environment, allegedly relying on standard recreational setups.
And even with all that advanced technology and world-class expertise, the Finnish team described the mission in the Maldives as technically demanding, emotionally exhausting, and operationally complex.
I can't even imagine.
Navigating that dark, silent maze into the third chamber to retrieve the victims was a monumental task. It required massive, coordinated local military support.
And tragically, the unforgiving nature of Shark Cave claimed yet another life during this recovery effort. A Maldivian military diver named Mohammed Muthi, who was providing support for the operation, died attempting to help bring closure to those grieving families.
It's just heartbreaking. His death was caused by a completely different kind of technical failure related to extreme depth. He suffered from severe decompression sickness during the attempt.
This circles right back to the physics we were talking about earlier. Think of a shaken bottle of soda. When it's sealed under pressure, the liquid looks completely clear.
Right, you can't see anything wrong.
But the second you twist off that cap and release the pressure too fast, all the dissolved gases instantly turn into violently expanding bubbles. That is exactly what happens to the nitrogen dissolved in a diver's bloodstream if they ascend too quickly toward the surface.
The rapid pressure drop forces those nitrogen bubbles to form inside the tissues and blood vessels. It is an excruciatingly painful condition.
The bends.
Yes, the bends. It blocks blood flow, it damages organs, and as we saw with Mahudi, it can be rapidly fatal.
It adds such a heavy, devastating layer to this story. A man who bravely went into the dark to help retrieve the victims doesn't make it back to his own family because the environment is just that hostile.
This raises an important question about the sheer lethality of the specific site. Mahudi's death brought the total death toll of this single catastrophic incident to 6.
6 lives extinguished by one cave system.
It underscores how Thinwana Kandu essentially weaponizes fundamental physics against anyone who enters it, regardless of whether they're an explorer or a rescuer.
As we pull all these threads together, looking at the government reports, the technical analyses, and the tragedy of the recovery mission, the takeaways for you listening are incredibly sobering.
Very much so. The Italian authorities are still officially investigating the exact minute-by-minute sequence of events.
Right, like whether someone got physically trapped first, whether a specific regulator failed, or why the expedition proceeded so far past their 100-foot permit restriction.
But the broader picture, however, is already starkly illuminated by the technical data we have.
We are looking at a perfect storm of cascading errors. You have a group exceeding their authorized limits by 60 feet, plunging straight into the zone of intense nitrogen narcosis.
Yeah.
You have divers relying on inadequate recreational gear for an extreme, highly technical depth. And you have the unforgiving, claustrophobic reality of a pitch-black underwater labyrinth that actively strips away every single safety margin.
It is a powerful reminder of how terrifyingly tight the margin for error is when humans decide to push into environments that our biology simply isn't built to endure. It's a physical boundary we respect at our peril. But, you know, reviewing all of these sources leaves me with a thought to mull over that goes beyond the permit limits, beyond the specialized gas mixtures, and beyond the brutal physics.
Oh, it's that?
It's a fundamental question of human nature. What is the psychological lure of the deep?
Wow, yeah.
When presented with a dark, terrifying, suffocating maze, when we consciously know the immense risks, when we understand the limits of our gear, what is it that drives a human being to push past the absolute limits of their own biology? Why do we so often ignore the explicit warnings and the natural boundaries, risking everything, just to see what lies hidden in the absolute dark?
That is the enduring mystery of exploration, isn't it? Willingly swimming into the flooded, pitch-black maze, knowing full well the door might lock behind you. It's a reality that will stay with me for a long time. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the tragic mystery of Shark Cave. We hope unpacking these sources gave you some clarity on an incredibly complex and heartbreaking situation. Keep asking questions, respect the boundaries of the unknown, and most importantly, wherever your curiosity takes you, explore safely.
Okay, one question for you. How could 5 highly experienced Italian divers become trapped and die inside the Maldives' infamous shark cave despite their advanced diving knowledge and research background? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.